The sky was blue, the color of a robin's egg. I saw a nest of them once, while climbing a neighbor's tree. I was 8 at the time, and hunting for a stray frisbee. My brother, the jackass, had thrown it next door. I didn't remember the reason why. That part was hazy, but I would never forget my surprise at finding the eggs. They sat in their nest like a handful of treasures. That was 56 years ago, practically a lifetime. As I watched, a smattering of clouds drifted across the sky. The wind up there must really be blowing for them to move like that. Down below, where I was, the breeze was gentle, swaying the grass around me. I looked around and realized I was lying on my back on a hillside. In the distance, a line of trees marked the edge of a forest. Fields and crops stood in between, while farther up the hill was a tall wall, like the kind you'd find in a Miyazaki film. The stones were cartoonish in their size and placement. They reached up at least 30 feet, though, and seemed sturdy. I couldn't remember arriving at this place. My last memory was of leaving the office. I worked as an office manager for a company making documentary films for the education market. We were called Southwind Productions, which was ironic for a company based in Portland, Oregon. The weather report had predicted freezing rain in the afternoon, so I'd cut out of work early to beat the bad weather and traffic. The next thing I knew, I was on the hillside, with no sign of cold or rain. If anything, the air was balmy. The breeze felt good against my body. I lifted my hands. They were smaller than they should have been, and held none of the scars a person naturally gathered over time. They were innocent hands, untouched by life, and the rest of my body matched. I was no longer 64 years old, but a child. If I had to guess, I was about 9 or 10. Had I slipped and hit my head? Was I unconscious and dreaming? The sky, the scent of the grass, and the way the hillside prodded my back, those all felt real. My thoughts and emotions were muffled, though. I recognized that something very wrong had taken place, but the alarm was distant, as if under a thick blanket of mild acceptance. Minutes passed, an hour or two. I didn't wake up. Nothing happened besides the clouds continuing to shift across the sky. More time passed. My body became hungry. There was an emptiness inside me, as if I'd been fasting for days. My distant mind registered that I should find food. I stood. On my feet were woolen socks and a pair of leather shoes. I also wore thick woolen pants and shirt. They were simple clothes, but well made. I peeked inside the pants. Still male. At least that hadn't changed. I walked uphill to follow the line of the wall. Where there were people, there would be food. And I found my first person after a short walk. A man stood at the gate to the town. He wore chainmail over a thick cloth jacket, and a spear rested on his shoulder. I stood there amazed. Even my distant thoughts went silent. It had been a long time since I'd been to a Renaissance fair, and I hadn't expected to come across one so randomly. The guard at the gate grew more and more uneasy as I stared at him. The spear went from resting on his shoulder to being held at the ready. His knuckles were white, gripping the haft. He yelled at me and brandished his spear. A woman dressed in mail came out to join him. They hurriedly exchanged words, but I understood none of them. The language sounded like nothing I'd heard before. The woman also held a spear, and she joined in pointing it at me. Their faces were ugly with fear.